Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Ninth House, chapters 3, 4, and 5. In these chapters, well, we get to find out a little bit more about this murder that has occurred. And I don't know what's going on, but I do not care for the alignment this murder has with the Greys and their open, bee-buzzing mouths. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you so much to Joanna for commissioning this episode. What's up, Joanna? So, first of all, Joanna, how dare you? You could have just not commissioned this book and said that maybe I should read it, and then I could have just read it and not had to wait between episodes like a chump in agony. And I am absolutely champing at the bit to read more of this. Last recording, not only did I listen to the next chapters right away. Normally when I say I listen to the next chapters right away, what I mean is after I finished my recordings for the day, I put on my earplugs or my AirPods, do some chores, and listen. But when I say it this time, what I mean is I finished the recording for Ninth House, and after that I had like a One Piece episode. So between the Ninth House recording and the One Piece recording, I listened to 20 minutes of the next chapter immediately because I couldn't wait. Now, I can't tell you exactly what it is that has got me so deeply hooked already. And it's very interesting to me because I had heard some folks say that they felt this book was slow. That was a while ago. I can't even remember who said it to me, but I cannot imagine what they are used to if they find this slow. I am so fascinated and so mystified and really taken with these two characters, our main characters, Darlington, and I still can't get over that her name is Galaxy. But Galaxy, whose grandmother's name was Estrella, which means star, but her mother's name was Mira, which means to look, which I am like not sure what that like symbolism is, but it feels like it's something. I just think they are both so well drawn and so compelling in entirely different ways. And this universe feels so real to me. And so there is a kind of anxiety I'm getting from this story that I am not used to with this sort of property. And it is spurring me to spin out wildly with like my theories or just wondering how I would do in a situation like this. I love this. I'm so into it already. So we start with chapter 3, winter. It's winter, last fall, winter, just FYI. And the last fall chapter is pretty much entirely from Darlington's perspective, if I'm not mistaken. And when we are in winter, the place we ended with at the end of chapter 2 was Alex getting the call that there had been a murder at the gym and her realizing that she has to just turn around and she can't go home and get some sleep. And something that always like kind of works on me in terms of a narrative device is really hammering on the fact that a character hasn't gotten to rest. This works really well in like Dresden Files as well, because there's a lot of times where Harry just can't fucking take a break or things may fall apart. A couple times where he's been like tricked into taking a break because he refused to do it. And I really, the fact that she's like in a new situation that's ostensibly meant to be a better setup for her than her old life, but she still winds up relying on this stimulant. And it's like, yeah, it's a magical stimulant, but it's still a drug that she's using as an upper to get her through the day. It just feels very unfair. It just seems like, can this poor bitch get a break, for God's sake? So we have this beginning bit where she's thinking about who dies at the gym. And I was sort of like, when she asked this question, my first thought was, maybe that's kind of common, actually. Like, people will push it too hard and they will cause themselves injuries of a variety of types, I would imagine. And maybe that's not that uncommon. She'd let Mercy drag her to a salsa class where a white girl snugly packed into taut black pants had told her to pivot. And that just like cracked me up a little bit. Just like, there is something about, I've been taught like hip hop by white women. And that's not to say white women can't dance hip hop. They certainly can. But there's always just a bit of a vibe of like, this feels wrong. So, especially because I think what we're getting from Alex is that she is of Latin descent, because I think she mentions her abuela at one point. So, like, it's going to be extra noticeable to her. Darlington had encouraged her to use the free weights and to, quote, build up her cardio, unquote. For what? Alex had asked. To better yourself. Only Darlington could say something like that with a straight face. But then again, he ran 6 miles every morning and swept into rooms on a cloud of physical perfection. And here we find out that he is extremely good looking. I don't feel like we quite realized that he had also a beautiful face until now, but it specifically mentioned how all her roommates are sort of like, when he shows up, they sort of gather themselves, sit up, adjust their hair, become very conscious of themselves. And Alex is annoyed because even she does it. She wishes that he didn't affect her at all, but he does. And I sort of appreciate that she can admit that, because obviously it can be anytime that you are attracted to a person who feels either like they are completely not attracted to you, or that they are from a totally different world and being attracted to them feels sort of pointless in a weird way, that's already kind of hard. But it's another thing entirely to be attracted to somebody who is sort of I hesitate to say that he's patronizing, because I think he really tries to avoid that, but it happens a little anyway. And when they are in a position of sort of power over you and you feel this way, and socially they would be considered your superior by a lot of people, it's just a real shit situation to like be drawn to somebody like this. So we find out like he had sicked jackals on her on the first day at the mansion on Orange. And we get this from like both perspectives, but she is noticing that when she tells him to call off the dogs, he just immediately does it and doesn't seem to be like considering how fucked up this was to do to her. He smiles at her, and we don't get like any more of this scene in this moment. Just her thinking like she wishes that she could attack him in that moment, but she has to play along. So when she gets back to her dorms, one of the girls is immediately like, does he have a girlfriend? And one of them says he smells like money. And it's interesting because I don't like, based on the ways that Darlington has been talking, the impressions that I'm getting from him when I'm in his POV, I don't feel like he does have a girlfriend, but there's also no real sense of interest in any woman in that sense. And I don't know if this is just an indication that he is not really like interested in a relationship or particularly sexually active, or maybe just like, you know, it's just not a priority for him right now. He might be gay, but again, there's nothing to indicate that and just having like no interest in women doesn't mean someone's gay. So I don't know. I'm curious about what the deal is with that. So she gets to this murder scene, and there is I'm going to read this part. Ahead of her, grays formed a thin gruel that shifted over the roof of the law school, spreading and curling like milk poured into coffee, drawn by the grind of fear and ambition. Book and Snake's towering white tomb loomed on her right. Of all the society buildings, it was the most like a crypt. Ahead of her lay Grove Street Cemetery. Alex glimpsed a cluster of grays gathered by a grave near the entrance. And she is thinking about all of the things that grays are drawn to, and immediately begins to think of the dorm and like all the activity there, and is like, oh, that is where I should be. So she gets to this scene, and there's a coroner's van there already. Officers are there creating a perimeter, and she's thinking about growing up and how she's learned to deal with cops. Her time with Len had left her wary of cops. When she was younger, he'd gotten a kick out of having her help with deliveries because no uniform, campus security, or LAPD was going to stop a chubby kid in braids looking for her big sister on a high school campus. But as she'd gotten older, she'd lost the look of someone who belonged in wholesome places. Even when she wasn't carrying, she'd learned to keep well clear of cops. Some of them just seemed to smell the trouble on her. But now she was walking toward them, smoothing her hair with a gloved hand. Just another student. And this is something I find really fascinating because, like, you know, I have no experience with being somebody who is just into shit that would get the attention of law enforcement, really. And the idea that they could tell at all just by looking at you that some shit is up. Granted, that's how profiling begins, and that's not an accurate thing. But she's aware that they're right when they're looking at her. And I'm really wondering, like, where that instinct comes from. And also how quickly her life must have been going badly for her to wind up already looking like she doesn't belong in wholesome places when she's just like a teenager, you know? So Centurion is there. He's the liaison between Lethe House and the chief of police. He was a full half head taller than either the detective or uniform. Black, his head shaved in a low fade. He wore a sharp navy suit and what was probably a real Burberry overcoat. And ambition rolled off him like thunder. Too pretty, her grandmother would have said. And then it says in Spanish, "Quien se presado se vistió en medio de la calle se quitó." And I didn't even bother to try and find out what this means. I'm going to see, something about basically like if they are dressed well, then, you know, something shady. I'm going to do this right now and see if I can get a translation just for the curiosity of it. But it comes down to like her grandmother did not trust men who look too good. Okay, I put it into Google and everybody is just like, oh yeah, this is from Lee Bardugo. No, I know what it is. Sorry guys, I'm just... Quien se prestado se vestían en medio de la calle se quitó. Who borrowed, dressed in the middle of the street, took off. What in the world? Well, that didn't work. Because there was a time, guys, when I knew some Spanish, but that time is long gone. So if anybody wants to help me with this, I don't know why this translation is so bad, but that's what it says. Who borrowed, dressed in the middle of the street, took off. That does not help me. Okay. Anyway, Estrella Stern didn't trust handsome men, particularly the well-dressed ones. So she texts him, and I love that she's walking up and there had been a crowd, but she stinks so bad that when she walks up, they immediately begin to walk away. And she sees him pull his phone out, check it, and say, I know you're here. And he does nothing. She waits for 10 minutes. She waits for 20 minutes. She's looking around and grays are starting to like come around because there are a lot of people here and people are curious about what's been going on. And we have this flashback to Darlington asking her, when did you first start to see them? And her thinking, he always asks the wrong questions. And we find out later that what she considers the right question is, when did you learn to be afraid? Because apparently she started seeing them from so young that she didn't get it. She didn't even understand that they were dead because they're in color to her, you know? Darlington is thinking she's seeing like these black and white figures that don't look like regular people the way that he sees them. And it's not like that for her. So she wasn't understanding. So she finally just texts him, my next call is to Sandow. Now, I don't know what the fucking issue is with this centurion, but he is such a fucking dick. And there seems to be some reason behind it, but I cannot figure out what it is. He is so antagonistic for no reason. And she says, I'm not here to make trouble. I'm here because I was told to be. And he laughs and says, we all have jobs to do. And I'm like, yeah, that's like what she just fucking said. And then she says, it's Thursday night, preceded by Wednesday, followed by Friday. What? Like, you know what she means by that, though. And then when she says, is there a cause of death? Of course something caused her death. I know what you meant. Well, then why are you fucking acting like this? Like, I really, if I were her, would have snapped on his ass. I would not, like, there is a part of me that tends to really go along to get along a lot of the time. But when a person is being like this, and they seem to be like smug and really think a lot of themselves and feel like they're being clever, there is no more instantaneous motivation for me to crush them, because a person acting like this is not more intelligent. They are just inherently can't be, because they're being an asshole for no fucking reason, or they're hiding something that they are mad about, which is also not an intelligent way to handle a thing. So in my opinion, if you want to play like that, I'm about to show you the truth. And finally, she has to like say again, there may be a society involved because it's Thursday. And he asks her, who were you with? And she said, the Bonesmen are on tonight. And he says, tell them to return Geronimo's skull, which is an interesting thing because I feel like I've heard this before. And she tells them they don't have it, but they do have his liver and small intestine in a jar. And she just does not share that part. And he asks where Darlington is, and she says Spain. Another back and forth. And he asks, where are you from? Why? Look, he said, you seem like a nice girl. No, said Alex. I don't. He conceded the point. All right, he said, you have a job to do tonight, and so do I. You did your part. You talked to me. You let Sandow know a girl died here, a white girl who's going to get plenty of attention without you getting in our way. We're going to keep this far from the university and all the rest. You've done your bit, and you can go home. That's what you want, isn't it? I do, but Dean Sandow will want. She's town, Stern. Back the fuck off. She's town, not a student, not connected to the societies. Let it go. He leaves, and she's like, you know what? No, I'm not going to let this go. She just seems to have a vibe Something's not quite okay here. And we get this beautiful paragraph that's been highlighted by a lot of people. According to my Kindle, it's been highlighted 1,400 times, which actually makes a lot of sense to me because I haven't looked at this in print, so I'm only just seeing that. But when I listened to the audiobook, I was really this moment brought me to a standstill a little bit and made me go, oh, that's such a good way to say this. What Darlington and probably all the rest of these eager, effortful children couldn't understand was that Alex would have happily settled for less than Yale. Darlington was all about the pursuit of perfection, something spectacular, which honestly, same. He didn't know how precious a normal life could be, how easy it was to drift away from average. You started sleeping until noon, skipped one class, one day of school, lost one job, then another, forgot the way that normal people did things. You lost the language of ordinary life. And then, without meaning to, you crossed into a country from which you couldn't return. You lived in a state where the ground always seemed to be slipping from beneath your feet with no way back to someplace solid. Whew, that hit me hard. This is the kind of thing that I am really lucky, I feel, to have sidestepped. And I feel like in some ways it is part of the reason why I have been perpetually in relationships in a lot of my life, is because I never felt like I could be somewhere solid on my own. And I don't mean that in terms of I was not capable, because I do consider myself capable. But I mean more circumstantially, I know that the world is not set up in a way that I can make it on my own and be stable with the kinds of jobs that I am qualified for. I couldn't have my own apartment and live by myself and be stable and secure. And I knew that. So I think a lot of my pursuing long-term relationships was just related to doing it together is going to be more reliable. We'll be able to create a life that I probably won't have access to on my own. And things really went left for me as soon as I decided that I wasn't going to finish college. I dropped out of Carnegie Mellon at the end of my freshman year, pretty much. I didn't even really finish my freshman year. And then did a year abroad and then was like, I don't know what I want to do, and left and decided to move home. And my home was gone. My parents had divorced, sold the house. My dad was living in a 1-bedroom apartment. My mom was living in a studio, and I had to move in with my aunt and uncle in a strange town. And it was just a really weird situation that felt like if I don't figure it out from here, I am going to be struggling hard forever. This is the critical moment where if I don't get to a place that is safe now, I don't know how I'm ever getting there. And I got lucky and met somebody that I was able to sort of scramble to solid ground a little bit. But I really felt in that period of my life, I'm on a slippery slope here and things are not going well. And I could sense that things with the way the economy was shifting, it was just a sort of vibe of I am only I knew that I wasn't going to be able to make it. And it was part of the issue with Brendan and him feeling I'm feeling like you just don't really want to work. And I didn't know how to explain to him at the time because I didn't have the language for it. It's not that I don't want to work. I actually enjoy working. I am a hard worker and I take pride in it. It is that it never feels like I get anything out of it. I am not promoted. I am not given raises. I am not paid better, really, in proportion to my work, the way that I've been told it's supposed to work. And he didn't understand that because he was somebody who had fallen accidentally into his dream job and also had all of his college paid for. So he just didn't really understand the particular struggle I had with the kinds of work that I could find. And I got really lucky. Like I said, you know, I am in this place now where I'm doing my dream job, and I worked very, very hard to get here. I put myself through a lot, but I also had I had Brendan initially, and then I had Owen helping give me a safety net. And a lot of people don't get that. And again, I feel like in a lot of ways I am where I am because I had a partner. I had a relationship that helped get me through. So while it may feel kind of mercenary to be like, I think I chose relationships for the stability, I don't think that's unusual. And I'm not really ashamed of it because I feel like that's also why men choose relationships. I feel like that's part of why Owen chose me as well. And this poor girl getting involved with somebody very young, it sounds like she was, you know, a kid who was exploiting her even then. And I'm guessing started to string her out pretty young and exploit her sexually, as we like hear at some point she's thinking about how so-and-so never had to fuck a stranger in a men's room to make up their boyfriend's vig. And this is somebody who has like gone for so long with no chance of normality. She doesn't even have a place to get back to. I started to slide in a direction that I could see very clearly where I was headed if I didn't get myself back into place. But I had a place that I could imagine because I had a kind of stability, as fucked up as it was. She never has seemed to have that from a very early age. And that is outside of the fact that she can fucking see ghosts who look like they did when they died, which is even worse. So the whole thing with her, it just feels like she was set up to lose from the start. It just feels like she never had a chance. And so she's been handed this opportunity with Yale that a lot of people would be like, why don't you try and make the most of it? But like, how? She literally doesn't know how. She is drowning here. She is trying to produce Ivy level work when she never even graduated high school, I don't think. Like, it seems like she dropped out while maintaining this weirdo position in a secret society that deals with the supernatural, which she was not adequately trained for and which her fucking like mentor disappeared from. How is she supposed to do this? I really feel for her because like this whole thing with her history, it sounds like a fucking nightmare. So I really got to pick it up. I'm sorry. But anyway, she uses this coin of compulsion to get the coroner to open the body bag and talk to her about what's going on. And we find out later this coin is actual gold and this guy is probably going to just throw it away. And this absolutely shatters me. I want Alex to like follow him and watch him throw it away and then pick it up and just sell it. I need her to just like make the most out of this, because at one point he being Darlington tells her you can keep an extra change of clothes at Il Bastion, I think. And she's like, I don't even have enough clothes to do that with. And I'm like, girl, you've got a gold fucking coin. And apparently it's like used up enough. Go get it. Sell that fucking gold and buy yourself some goddamn clothing. Like, you shouldn't be in this position. And I kind of resent the fact that they have recruited her and given her this job and all these expectations, but they have not given her any kind of allowance for her like necessities. And I just hate that for her. So, and I think also Alex feels a kinship to this girl who is murdered because she is not a student, so she doesn't matter to anybody. And they don't want to say she doesn't matter, but they are essentially saying that repeatedly. And she like zeroes in on that a couple times. And this girl had been stabbed quite a few times. The wounds were all centered on her heart. She'd been struck with enough force that it looked as if her sternum had started to give way, the bones fracturing in a shallow, bloody crater. And when she asks for a time of death, the coroner thinks it's her boyfriend, which, why wouldn't you? It's always the boyfriend. But he tells her around 11, which was when those grays started to act up. And all I could think was, there is a correlation between the intensity of the pressure on this girl's chest and the intensity of the pounding on the chalk circle. And I don't know if that is anything, but that's immediately what I thought of, was that somehow this poor girl was like a proxy for getting through. And this, like, the pounding on her sternum was what Alex was feeling, pounding on the chalk circle. Again, completely invented. Do not know if that's anything, but it just felt like something to me. So, she takes off, and we get this sort of like little bit about the history of the ninth house and the discovery of like a body that had been desecrated and all of this oversight that had to be put in place because basically bitches did not know how to act is what it comes down to. Harkness, Whitney, and Bingham drew on knowledge from each of the societies to create a storehouse of arcane magic for use by the deputies of Lethe. This was added to significantly in 1911 when Bingham traveled to Peru, and we get more information about that and the Golden Bowl, and it's a whole other thing. So this is when we go back to Darlington, and we start with the jackal thing, and he's saying how she's in terrible shape. And I love, she says, and you're an asshole. And he says, then we both have hardships to overcome. And I don't know why, but that really made me laugh. So this is when he asks again, why the long sleeves? She says track marks, and he says, show me. And she holds out her arm, and all of a sudden he's really aware. He shouldn't even have asked. This isn't his business. He's pushing too hard. But he has like a little too much pride to let it go the way he knows he should. Her holding her arm out is her challenging him, and he can't back down because he just is the type that can't, which I relate to. And he slides the sleeve up and sees all of these tattoos, one of which is the wheel from tarot. And he's like, why are you hiding these? Nobody cares. Like, lots of people here have tattoos. And like, okay, maybe not full sleeves, but some do. It's not that uncommon. Why do you want to hide them? And she doesn't answer. She just says, any other hoops to jump through? And I'm really curious now. Why? What we get are the curling tail of a rattlesnake, the sunburst bloom of a peony, and the wheel. And I'm really going to keep track of these because I feel like there has to be a reason she's gotten the types of tattoos she's gotten. Some of it I can't help but wonder is like, was there an element of her trying to protect herself from these visions? Did she get tattoos hoping something symbolic could keep her from seeing what she sees? Like, you know, I don't know. But anyway, they go inside to Il Bastion, and this is when we meet Pamela Dawes. And I had gotten the impression from Alex's perspective that Pamela Dawes was going to be a lot more of a hard ass, but it turns out Dawes is just extremely awkward and doesn't like people. One could read this a lot of ways. I think autistic is probably the one most people would go with. And I am tempted to go in that direction as well. But I also don't like just assigning that, you know. But there's a real sense here of just, there's nothing, like Pamela doesn't dislike her, doesn't dislike anyone. She just doesn't want to deal with people. And frankly, hard relate. And so the way that Alex was thinking of her was more like, she used language, I think something like tight-jawed, silence, in a way that I read as she doesn't want to be around somebody who is uptight and disapproving. But from what I'm seeing of Dawes, it doesn't seem like that's actually the atmosphere. It would be much more like sitting next to somebody that is dying to be literally anywhere else, that doesn't want to be here. And that's, also unpleasant. But also, honestly, Alex is sort of trying to decide whether she wants to go here and deal with Dawes, or go to her shitty dorm room and take a shower in the grimy showers there instead of like this amazing bathroom where somebody's waiting with bourbon and sandwiches. I would deal with Dawes. I don't care. Like, there's just no contest to me. So Alex and I clearly have very different priorities, I guess. I don't know. So let's see. It was left to Dawes to make sure they were left well supplied, that any perishable items were freshened or disposed of before they turned foul, and to maintain any artifacts that required it. Cuthbert's pearls of protection had to be worn for a few hours every month, or they lost their luster and their power to protect the wearer from lightning strikes. A Lethe alum named Lee DeForest, who had once been suspended as an undergrad for causing a campus-wide blackout, had left Lethe with countless inventions, including the Revolution Clock, which showed an accurate-to-the-minute countdown to armed revolt in countries around the globe. It had 22 faces and 76 hands, and had to be wound regularly or it would simply begin screaming. I don't know why that fucking cracked me up so bad. Just the idea of a clock that just starts screaming. I mean, how stressful. We don't need this. So this is when we get to Hiram's Crucible, the Golden Bowl, which it turns out was low-key stolen from Machu Picchu. And this is like the thing that they use to make this particular potion that they kept getting wrong, and they couldn't understand. So it's the key to Orociero. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. I don't remember how the audiobook narrator says it. The problem with Lethe's elixir wasn't the recipe, it was the vessel. So it's a magical mixing bowl. Such a little heathen. I might not put it that way, but yes. And he says the elixir is also named the Golden Trial, Hiram's Bullet. Every time a member of Lethe drinks it, every time the crucible is used, he takes his life in his hands. The mixture is toxic and the process incredibly painful. But we do it, again and again, for a glimpse behind the veil. I get it, said Alex. I've met users before. It isn't like that, he wanted to protest. But maybe it was. And I'm like, yeah, it kind of sounds like it is. You're trying to grasp something that honestly isn't yours to grasp, And again, he asks, when did you first see them? And she starts talking about how she didn't know what they were. And it wasn't until some kid was like, hey, you want to see my dick? That she was like, I've seen a lot of dicks. I do not care. It's fine. And it got back to one of the parents, and they took her into like child protective services wanting to know what the fuck. And Darlington is really suddenly brought down to earth because he's thinking about all of these sort of romantic notions of what it could have been like for her to see ghosts, and this sort of elevated experience that's like mysterious and fascinating, and hearing about these incredibly mundane, like ghosts that are just naked and holding fucking remote controls and stuff. It's just not what he was thinking. And then the whole CPS thing and her being dragged in there is how they started to like track her and because there's an algorithm that searches through files for keywords like this. And that's how the Skull and Bones started to pay attention to her. It's just for him a kind of, a reality check as to what it's probably actually like. Because he keeps on being very envious of her and has to remind himself, maybe not, maybe I shouldn't be. And this is when he says, and that night in the apartment on Cedros. And this is when she says, oh, you mean Ground Zero? And I'm like, oh, okay. So I was taking Ground Zero as her being like talking about 9/11. I was taking it as the literal Ground Zero that we talk about. And this is apparently like just her name for this event. And all he says is, I want to know how you survived. And she says, so do I. Crime scene photos. 5 men dead, all of them beaten, nearly unrecognizable. 2 of them staked through the heart like vampires. Despite the carnage, blood spatter indicated it was all the work of one perpetrator. Arcs of red, every vicious blow struck from left to right. Something was off about the whole thing. But Alex was never a suspect. For one thing, she was right-handed, and for another, she was far too small to have wielded a weapon with so much force. Besides, she had enough fentanyl in her system that she was lucky she hadn't died herself. Her hair had been wet, and she'd been found naked as a newborn. Darlington had dug a little deeper, unable to shake his suspicions, but there had been no blood or remains in the drain. If she'd somehow been involved, she hadn't showered the proof away. So why had the attacker left the girls alone? All I could think is like, somehow she channeled something to defend herself. I don't know, like, her saying, I also would like to know how I survived. That does not sound like the kind of response you'd say if somebody had attacked a bunch of people all at once and you just survived for some reason. This sounds like she was caught up in whatever happened in a particular way that felt like she would die too. And I don't know if the fentanyl is like a stepping stone for her connecting with something. And it's, I'm assuming like from the beginning, I've been assuming she's been using in order to escape her reality, which is surrounded by like fucking horrifying sights all the time. But is it possible that she managed to channel something to use, or that something stepped into her and used her? Because she's right-handed and too small. But what if she still did it and it just wasn't quite her? Like, I don't know. There is something about this that feels like it's certainly a supernatural thing, but I can't imagine also like her friend died of an overdose. And I don't know if what she did was a reaction to that, or if that was a side effect, or if it was sort of unrelated, circumstantial. So curious about this. Really, really, really curious. And Darlington, for his part, is like kind of on the same track as me, not necessarily thinking what I'm thinking, but just generally like, there's something fishy and she knows something and she's just not sharing. And that's her right to not share. But I am aware that she has got info she doesn't want to tell. And again, she like says something about her friend Helly dying, and he suddenly feels really guilty for pushing because he's like, this is so personal. Her friend died. Like multiple friends of hers died. Everything got taken away from her. And I'm over here just like pressing for details. And he sort of backs away and is kind of like, I'm an asshole. And this is what I kind of like about Darlington. Like, is he a little bit fucking priggish, as he puts it? Yes. He is a perfectionist to a point that a lot of people wouldn't really understand. I deeply understand. I don't pursue it as consistently and admirably in my eyes as he does, but I really get where he's coming from with this. But I appreciate the self-awareness. I appreciate the moments of empathy. He really isn't a dickhead. He just sometimes lets his humanity and empathy take a back seat to his curiosity and desire for knowledge. And that can be a dangerous thing to do. So he just has to keep an eye on that. And he seems aware he has to keep an eye on that. You know, he comes back to himself and he'll suddenly be like, God, what's wrong with me? So they go into this other room and he's like, all right, you're going to have to take your shirt off. I'll give Dawes the box. And she just takes her shirt off and is like, fuck Dawes. I don't want to deal with Dawes. She doesn't like me. Don't go get her. And he's a little bit irked at how she just takes her shirt off and she's just like, ugh, get over it. So he opens this box and she really quickly backs away and he's surprised. He's like, what's wrong? And she says, I don't like butterflies. And he says, they're moths. And honestly, my reaction was like, oh, that's so much worse. That's worse. You know how that's worse, right? I hate moths. For those who aren't aware, I fucking hate them. So she has to stand really still and he puts the moths on her body at all of these particular points and then like says a spell and the moths suck the ink off her body so that her tattoos almost completely disappear. There are a couple points where they're still a little visible because the needle went deeper there, but mostly gone. And he explains that these moths were used to like drink up messages. They're basically like a fax machine. And then you send the moths off and they land on a paper and they spit the ink out in the exact configuration that they swallowed it up. So you get an exact copy of whatever document they ate, basically. And she is so like fascinated by this. And then we get this bit. This was why he had done it. Not because of guilt or pride, but because this was the moment he'd been waiting for. The chance to show someone else wonder. To watch them realize they had not been lied to. That the world they'd been promised as children was not something that had to be abandoned. That there really was something lurking in the wood, beneath the stairs, between the stars. That everything was full of mystery. And I just love that so much because, again, it tells you so much about Darlington. He isn't into this because of the superiority. It's like he is offering people a kind of hope, and he loves that because he remembers what it felt like for him to suddenly know that what he believed in as a child actually was real and to be held on to. And the kind of like delight that would bring. It makes me like him better, you know? And Alex smiles and he's looking at her thinking, that was what magic did. It revealed the heart of who you'd been before life took away your belief in the possible. Maybe it could do that for Alex as well. Months later, he would remember the weight of the moths' bodies in his palm. He would think of that moment and how foolish he had been to think he knew her at all. And I'm like, yo, why? And he also cautions her that like human saliva will cause the tattoos to come back. And we know that in the present, I guess it's not technically the present, but it's winter, when he is gone and she has gone to the prognostication. Is that what it's called? I can't remember. She's back to long sleeves and hiding her arms and stuff. So I am assuming somehow they came back. Well, actually, I'm saying that, but this dude asked her if she had tattoos and she said no. I can't remember if she is actually wearing the long sleeves again or if she's just saying no because it doesn't look like she has any tattoos right now. Can't recall. So then chapter 5, winter. And I'm going to kind of have to go through this fairly quickly, but we spend some time with Mercy. And this is really funny to me because those of you who listen to or have read the Cradle books, there is like a character named Mercy in those. And I kept sort of picturing her in this. And I don't know if that's like, it doesn't really feel like they actually overlap. But Mercy dresses kind of loudly and is really one of the few that doesn't feel like she fits in with the type of extremely rich white kid vibe of the rest of the students. So she's attempting to fit in a way that Alex isn't attempting. Alex also doesn't fit in, but she's not trying to make herself fit because she's highly aware it's probably just not happening, you know, and she's got another job to do. She's got shit on her mind. Mercy is attempting to create like a space for herself. And Alex likes her because Mercy is a lot more patient and a lot more sort of like, she doesn't laugh when Alex doesn't know certain words, and just genuinely apparently like has empathy for Alex and is trying to help in a real way. So let's see, I'm trying to find this bit here. Oh yeah, we get a bit here about Alex's father. All she knew was that he loved the ocean, that he was a Gemini, and that he was brown. Mira couldn't tell her if he was Dominican or Guatemalan or Puerto Rican, but she did know he was an Aquarius rising with his moon in Scorpio or something. So she hadn't wanted to return to Ground Zero to pick up any of her old stuff, and the belongings in her mother's apartment were little girl things. In the end, she'd packed a hunk of smoky quartz that her mother had given her, her grandmother's nearly illegible recipe cards, an earring tree she'd had since she was 8, and a retro map of California, which she hung next to Mercy's poster of Coco Chanel. I know she was a fascist, Mercy had said, but I can't quit her. Which we all have our problematic faves. What can you do, girl? And we find out that Alex has been like trying to skate by on easy classes, but keeps really mistaking what's going to be easy. She doesn't even have enough education to predict some of the difficulties that she's going to run into. So she's trying to write art, like her essays, and it's just not up to the fucking standards they need. And so she's on academic probation, and Mercy is offering to edit her papers with her and help her out, which she really appreciates, genuinely does. Is like, you know, she doesn't have to spend her time doing this. So she can't sleep because she has to pretend she came home and slept and went out for a run. So she has to use these like belladonna stimulants in her eyes, like these drops, and go to breakfast like she slept, and it's awful. I hated this so much for her. And we have this moment about her. First, she's thinking about how Yale doesn't have any glamour, which it's wild because Yale is really beautiful, but I see what she means. And like the comparisons to LA, I also like Connecticut. There is beauty in its way, but yeah, you don't go to Connecticut for like fashion. Having lived there most of my life, there is a reason why I was named best dressed, and it's because I put fucking any effort into doing something different. I went wild with my clothes, yes, but nobody, even in New Haven, the clothing was not really, you had to make your own stuff if you wanted something distinctive. It was real rough out there. So this felt extremely true to me. And Mercy style just sounds delightful. She'd opted for a brocade coat embroidered with poinsettias that made her look like the world's youngest eccentric grandma. She wore endless parades of eyeglasses on glittery strings around her neck that Alex had yet to see her use. And they're heading to breakfast, and Mercy says something like, I only see you smile when we're going to go eat. At the squat in Van Nuys, they lived on Taco Bell and Subway when they were flush. Cereal, sometimes dry, sometimes soaked in soda if she got desperate, when they were broke, which, oh my God, kill me. Look, I've been poor. I haven't been this kind of poor. I haven't been the use soda instead of milk poor. That's rough. You know, this is a different thing. She'd steal a bag of hot dog buns whenever they were invited to barbecues at Aiton's place, so they had something to put peanut butter on. And once she tried to eat Loki's dry kibble, but her teeth couldn't manage it. Even when she lived with her mom, it had been all frozen food, boil-in-a-bag rice dishes, weird shakes and nutrition bars after Mira got suckered into selling Herbalife. Alex had brought protein pudding mix to school for weeks. Ugh, kill me. And she is just always hungry and always eats as much as she can and grabs food to keep in her bag in case shit goes left and she doesn't get to go here for food again, which that I can deeply relate to. It's wild. I haven't been this kind of poor, but I have been this kind of paranoid about being poor and kind of created these little like stashes. And it's not like there are people who make stashes of food in order to binge eat in private. It wasn't like that. I wouldn't touch it because I really was so anxious about what if I just don't have food at some point. And I don't know where that comes from because, like I said, I didn't grow up ever feeling like we didn't have enough. There was always a sense of like, food is expensive and you can't eat too much at once or it will be gone and we can't just go buy groceries whenever. But what food we had, it was somewhat nutritious and there was an adequate amount. And I still think about that and how I had this like weird anxiety about maybe there won't be food and I'm going to need this. And I don't know why, but it's, I think part of where my overeating comes from as well. This sort of sense of like, I better make hay while the sun shines. Essentially, you know, I've got it. I better eat the hell out of it because who knows what's going to happen. And I've been acting like that for almost 40 years. Like, I think I know what's going to happen. I think I'm going to have a meal again very soon and I don't need to worry, but I don't know. So Mercy is talking about going to this frat party and Alex is thinking about how just different their whole approach to this is. And then they see this woman whose name is Professor Bellbaum. And Bellbaum is French, but she is this incredibly elegant, beautiful older woman. And she is the one who had to tell Alex she was on academic probation. And she has to pull her away from Mercy, who Alex is so frustrated because this like stimulant has just kicked in and she's feeling ready to focus on her paper. And now she has to go talk to this woman who has assumed, by the way, that Alex is dyslexic, and that's why her papers are a mess. So Alex is talking to her and like trying to get a sense of what's going on because last time it was the probation and she's just really worried something is wrong. And they talk for a moment about the girl being murdered. And this is one of the moments where she's just like, well, but she wasn't a student at least. And I find out here that she has been painted as like an artist. Magic could create competent painters, proficient musicians, but not genius. She had added art electives to her class schedule because it was expected, and they'd proven the easiest part of her academic life because it wasn't her hand that moved the brush. When she remembered to pick up the sketchbooks Sandow had suggested she buy, it was like letting a trivet skate over a Ouija board, though the images that emerged came from somewhere inside her. Betcha half naked and drinking from a hole, which I'm like, yikes. Helly in profile, the wings of a monarch butterfly pushing from her back. Again, what? Is this why she doesn't like butterflies? Like, what? Just genuinely, what the fuck? And her professor is like, so what is it that you're after? Do you just want like stability? And Alex says yes, and she's got a bit of an edge to her, like challenging. And the professor's like, there is nothing wrong with wanting that. Like, it genuinely, if the only people who have never been at risk of not having it would feel this way about it. But I love this. The purest Marxists are always men. Calamity comes too easily to women. Our lives can come apart in a single gesture, a rogue wave. And money is the rock we cling to when the current would seize us. And Alex is so relieved, but then she's like, so once you've got money, then what? And Alex is just like, oh, I don't fucking know. Like, what am I supposed to have to say? And the professor is like, I'm just trying to find a way to motivate you. Do you wonder why I care about what you're going to do? It's because you haven't had everything handed to you like a lot of the kids here have. And I can tell that you're hungry, but I don't know for what. And you're certainly improving, and I can see that you're working hard and getting help. So the thing that I'm having trouble with is that all of your classes, they don't hang together to paint a picture of what you're after. And I'm trying to get you, and I am not succeeding. And she says, so think about what you want. And it may not be something you can find here, but if it is, I will do what I can to help you stay. And Alex is suddenly like, that sounds helpful, actually, and is thinking this is what she wants. And then all of a sudden the teacher says, over the summer, would you consider staying here and working for me? And Alex is like, wait, what? Really? What could I do for you? And Bellbaum is like, I mean, there's nothing that the people assisting me now can do for me that you can't do. You can handle all of this stuff for sure. I just don't want to see you left behind. And there are programs in the summer that might get you to where you need to be. You could catch your breath. And Alex is just sort of taking a moment going, that sounds like exactly what I want. Like, it's just such a relief, this whole concept. And when at the end of this little meeting, she says, thank you. Bellbaum says, don't thank me, just do the work. Which honestly, that really hit as well. So I'm trying to jump ahead here because, God, there's like a little bit more of this chapter, but a lot of it is her thinking about like what she's going to say about the murder. Like, she's overhearing all these people talking about it, and none of them are actually concerned about the girl because she wasn't one of them. So it's not hitting quite the same way. It's just the fact that it was on, like, I'm not even sure that that's considered university property exactly, but it's close enough to home that it feels like thrilling, but not in a way that actually feels unsafe. And this is it. So she's looking at the spot where Tara had been murdered, and all of a sudden starts thinking about Helly and her death and what she looked like. And she's like, why am I here? There was something bothering her about the scene. Last night, she'd approached from Grove Street, but now she was on the other side of the intersection. 2 streets, the stakes driven into the earth where Tara had died or been abandoned. Was it just seeing it in the daylight without the crowds that made it seem different? A false sense of déjà vu? Or maybe the basso belladonna was playing tricks on her. And let's see. Alex thought of Helly's shoe hanging for a brief moment from her toe, then dropping to the apartment floor with a thunk. Len turned to Alex, struggling with the weight of Helly's limp body, his hands cupped beneath her armpits. Betcha had Helly's knees tucked against his hip as if they were swing dancing. Come on, Len said. Open the door, Alex. Let us out. Let us out. She shook the memory away and glanced at the cluster of grays in front of the gym. So Helly was dead, but she was like apparently fully conscious. You know, like I had been thinking that they both did the drug together and went out unconscious together, and she just happened to take less. But it's seeming like Helly was, maybe this is her just unconscious, but it sounds like she was dead. I don't know. And she is looking at the grays and sees that there's just a vibe to them, like they're afraid. And she's never really seen them have this sort of like make this impression on her before. But she can't look too long because they notice when somebody takes interest and latch on. So she has to sort of like book it before they begin to zero in on her. Blondes always made Alex think of Helly, but why had the crime scene looked so familiar? What had she seen in that forlorn patch of dead earth bracketed by the flow of traffic? And Tara was nothing like Helly. She was like a bad knockoff, generic to Helly's name brand. No, said a voice in her head. And it was Helly, standing on a skateboard, rocking back and forth on those wide feet, her balance impeccable. Her skin was ashen. Her bikini top was spattered with clumps of her last meal. She's me. She's you, without a second chance. Alex fought her way back from the tide of sleep. Helly was long gone, and so were the people who had hurt her. But someone had hurt Tara Hutchins, too. Someone who hadn't been punished. Not yet. And she had gotten a text from the dean saying, don't worry about it, basically. And there's a part of her that deeply resents that he's telling her, one, nobody expects you to deal with this, but two, again, she's not a student, so it doesn't really matter. Alex reached into her dresser for the Basso Belladonna drops. One more afternoon. She could give Tara Hutchins that much before she buried her for good and moved on, the way she'd buried Helly. And again, just the fact that she's reaching for these drops again is making me so nervous. It makes me feel like I'm going to get through the rest of this book and she's not sleeping at all. Like, it just feels like the start of a sequence of events where she is not going to get to go to sleep. And I'm just very worried for her. So we will see. But I'm going to have to wrap this up. I'm over time. So thank you again so much, Joanna, for commissioning this. Appreciate you. So good. I'm really enjoying this. And I will be seeing you all soon. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.